But first, you're going to hear from my friend and colleague Jen Ryan from the footballdiehards.com. Going to talk a little DFS and gambling. I hear that's legal now, Jen. What do you know about this?
It is legal. Fortunate for me, I am from New Jersey, the state that pioneered the legalization, took it all the way to the Supreme Court, and here we are. We can finally, spend our money as we see fit as adults right here on the East Coast, rather than take all our money to the offshore books. And it's great. I mean, it's exciting. It's a part of my weekly research anyway. If you follow me on Twitter, you'll know that I love placing my prop bets. I made a trip 2 weeks ago to the Monmouth racetrack for the Monmouth Sportsbook, of course, in the name of research for the summit. And I got a few of my first live bets in. It felt really good. I'll be waiting for those prop lines. Generally they don't come out until the Friday or Saturday night before week one, but we do have some season-long stuff. There's a lot of things available. I'm so sorry, the dog is chewing on a toy.
All right, dogs chew. That's what they do. I have them off.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, he's not even my dog, but that's besides the point. But yeah, so I made my trip down to Monmouth. I got to see the action. It's a great setup. I'm excited to go to the Meadowlands, which is coincidentally right in my backyard. That's where the FanDuel Sportsbook is. And, if you've been listening to Bobby, Armando, anybody who was on tonight, you kept hearing Vegas lines and the importance of Vegas lines. And it's just like, it's kind of like the beginning part of the research for everybody. I'm sorry, I just want to get this damn thing in here.
Go ahead, take care of the dog.
Stop.
Everyone should have a dog with a squeaky toy because that's what dogs like.
His mom is on vacation, so he's stressed it out a little bit.
So just so we can say, Jen comes on serious with me on a weekly basis throughout the entire season, and if we don't hear from the dog, I worry. So this is very comforting to me, and I miss the dog. Looking forward to seeing him.
He's calm. But as I was saying, so yeah, as Bobby had touched on a bunch during his segment, and as Armando had touched on during both of his segments, it's sort of just in general where DFS players tend to start the research is those Vegas lines, checking out the high point totals, and taking a look at the implied totals and things like that. What I really like to get into in the season is the player props, but getting right into it, we have week one salaries already. We already have week one lines. So if you have already imported your salaries into some sort of a basic spreadsheet, you've already started kind of looking around, what you can do is you can jump on any one of these betting sites. You don't even need an account to do the research. I mean, I have an account at one, but you can hop right to get your weekly lines and begin sort of building what I use as my weekly DFS/gambling spreadsheet. So just to give you an idea of what some of these lines look like, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and show you. So share, and then if you hop in, you have to log. Oh, I'm still logged in. Perfect.
There it goes.
So,
yep.
So as you can see, for the true degenerates out there like myself, we have some preseason action, right? But because we're going to keep this at the DFS spin, and I'm not really touching on preseason, let's just go right down to week one so that we can kind of start looking at games you're going to want to target. So here's your Thursday night game, which is not available in the first run of at least DraftKings salary releasing. But right off the bat, here's your week one. You can see here's your spread line, and anytime you see the negative, if you're not super familiar with gambling, that's your favorite. Here's your point total. So as you kind of scroll through, you can see, okay, Steelers are favored on the road. We know how Ben is on the road. This is something that we're starting to think about already. We both Bobby and Armando touched on home underdogs, and now here's the Browns as an example. Here's a home underdog at home, playing from behind in a decent sized point total. So these are as I kind of go through the lines in the beginning, these are the things that I'm rattling off in my head. I'm kind of looking at each one and seeing what kind of DFS implications we might have. And if you keep scrolling down, now you have your 51-point game. Now, especially in week one, that's the type of game that people are going to attack. They're going to attack these 49, 50, 51-point totals. And what you could do to kind of get yourself a little bit of an edge is maybe go right under those. I mean, there's not a huge difference between a 48 point, 47 point, and 49.50. So maybe you get exposure to some players that not everybody's chasing for the highest point game, because that's one of the big things. You're obviously chasing the points. You're not super interested in a low point total, on the surface. It's all part of what you piece together and interpret. So again, here's your spreads, your overs and unders. This is what everything pays out based off the odds. And then, as I said, I like to bring this all into a spreadsheet with my DraftKings data so that I can kind of start to build up my research for the week. Because again, it's all connected. It all starts with Vegas, at least for me and for some of us. So an example of what the spreadsheet will start to look like for me, I have all my players, and this data is available right from the DraftKings website. We, of course, offer not only salary data for both DraftKings and FanDuel on footballdiehards.com, but we also have this cool stat that Emil has. It's kind of the V factor, and it shows you what a player needs to hit value that week. And it's another column you can add. I mean, as you can see, I have some columns here that I haven't started working on yet. Some of it is prop lines, which I won't have until the season starts. But just kind of going through, I like to look at my salary. I like to kind of visual, so kind of see, here's my over under, here's my spread, where it falls within the range of all the other players on the slate for the week. Here's your implied total for each team, which is simply the total points divided by 2. Then you take the spread divided by 2, add it to the favorite, take it away from the underdog. And as you can see, I've already started doing some research. I must have updated maybe on Bell's strip clubbing today. I don't know why that has an impact on his potential play for me week 1. But I just kind of go through and I take my notes based off of salary, based off of the Vegas stuff. And then as you can see, I'll add columns throughout. And again, just to stress, I mean, you heard from Bobby before, guys won $1 million. You heard from Armando. He's like a top DFS guy. You're hearing from me right now, who I love to play often, do okay, much better at prop betting and I guess interpreting Vegas, which is why I'm kind of talking about it tonight. But it's all so intertwined, and it's all just part of the basic research for your DFS for the week. So it's really where a lot of people are going to begin for the week, and it's a really good starting point. And then once we get these prop lines, now we can almost form a projection out of it. If a particular player has, like, for 4.5 catches, 65 yards, and maybe a touchdown, you can start to build a decent projection for at least an average of what that player might do that week. And it's really just kind of, there's so many pieces to the DFS puzzle every single week, and the Vegas over-unders are a part of it. I just like to take it a step further and dig into those player prop lines as well.
So let me just jump in here. The news and the information is my specialty. I talked about on day 1 of this, you listen to the 5 versions of the truth. The coach is telling you something, the player is telling you something, the local beat writers are all telling you something, and it's all a big bowl of light. You pull that thread of truth out of all those comments, because the truth is there. The whole story is there. You just have to figure out the different versions of it. This sounds similar to me, where you're looking at all the various aspects of the Vegas putting out, and there is no shortage of that in terms of the prop bets. And you're kind of doing the same thing. You're pulling out that line of fact that you can hang your hat on and succeed in these things.
Absolutely. And look, the odds are against us in DFS and in gambling. We're not supposed to win. The house is supposed to win, and the DFS site is supposed to win. If we were all winning all the time, the sites wouldn't exist and the books wouldn't exist. It's a huge game of variance. We're more likely to lose than we are to win, and we're more likely to be wrong than we are to be right every week, and we have to take these things into consideration. So when we pull all this different information and we take, like you said, coach speak, and we look at it a little deeper, and we take a simple Vegas line and we look at it a little bit deeper, now we're just getting more. We're getting more information. We're looking at it from different angles, and anything to get that edge, right? To try to get that money.
Right. So when you're looking at the Vegas line, are you looking at, Bobby mentioned, trying to exploit possible errors. Is that something you're doing as well? And if so, how are you doing that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and again, back to Bobby, he mentioned instinct, and this is all about instinct. I mean, each week when you're betting on yourself too. I mean, it's still variance. It's still gut feelings that come with that. And if you have a little bit of experience, you become a little better at it. But that's one of the things I love to do. I love, like now that I have the preferred website I was using and a sports book, I'm going to be able to compare those lines and see where I want to throw my money that week. I also look for individual game line totals that kind of seem a little off to me and maybe a little too generous, and I look to exploit that. And if I could just pull my spreadsheet up one more time, I feel like we have to talk about the New Orleans Saints and Tampa Bay Buccaneers game, and I just want to pull it up real quick, because if I am not mistaken, the highest, can you guys see my screen?
It's coming, yep, there you have it.
Great, all right, so again, simple Excel, simple filters. You go to the spread and you sort largest to smallest, and you scroll through your pick'ems, and you kind of get down here. Look at the Saints. They're favored by 10.5 points, which tells me on the other side of the ball, the Bucks are dogs by 10.5. That's so much. That's a huge total. And as you can see, I've already started making a few notes here, wondering if Kamara is going to be the chalk. Wonder if Breeze is going to be the chalk. And if maybe Fitzpatrick, who's going to be playing from behind on such a huge deficit, but still with a very large point total, approaching 50 points. These are the types of things I look at when it comes to lines. 10.5 to me, that's a lot. Like I'm very much so going to be throwing money on the Bucks there. Now, again, what that means is the Bucks don't have to win. They just can't lose by 10. They just have to lose by just 10 points. So if you figure they lose by a touchdown and a field goal, you're cashing your bet if you're betting, straight bet on them. So those are the sorts of things I like to look at, because, again, this is offshore book, 10.5 points. Last time I checked the Vegas book, it was 8.5. So it's a little more generous over here. Those are the things when it comes to betting that I like to look at. And again, you can get this all with your filters, but I always reset my filter, of course, to salary.
Right. So I guess, look, a lot of this is experience. We all watch this. We're all setting lineups. So basically gambling, it's like the feel. There's a lot of feel that goes into this. You like something, Vegas doesn't like it. How do you, just like gaining the confidence to do this? How long has it been for you to gain the kind of confidence to challenge what the Vegas odds makers are saying?
I lose confidence every time I lose a bet, but then I build it back up when I start doing research and I play some next week. Look, the guys in Vegas and the line makers, they're very, very good at their jobs. You say it all the time, Vegas knows what they're doing. I think as long as you're, responsible, I think as long as you're not betting completely out of control and you're staying within your own means, and truthfully, I think as long as you're having fun too, that's really the confidence you need. And when it comes to trying to exploit a line, it's almost like you're in competition with the book, no different than when you're in competition with a field when you're in a DFS matchup. You just want to see if you can get the best of them that week.
Right. And I guess so going forward on the prop bets, I know this is something you like. How many will you play in a given week? What kind of exposure will you have in a given week? Without money, just a number of bets.
It really depends, because I'll start in the beginning of the week when the lines are really generous and the odds are good. And then I track the line movement. So if that player's odds get even deeper and even more of a long shot, maybe I'll throw another low amount of money on top of it. I would say in a given week, I'm not really one to hedge. So who I'm playing in DFS, I'll take 4 or 5 of those guys, depending upon what the line looks like and what I like and what lines I set, because some sites also let you set lines. I'll back up my bets. That way, I'm much more of an all or nothing. I know some people in that sense, if you were more to hedge, maybe you would go and place some prop bets on players that you have no exposure to in DFS for the week to kind of, offset it if you take a hit on one or the other. But I would say 4 or 5 players, depending. Almost always my quarterback. I like betting touchdowns and yards. I like to, cheer at my TV. So I'd say about four to five players a week I'm throwing prop bets at.
Is hedging something you do in DFS as well as in betting?
I don't. I know it's for sustained. I should say this: if you want sustained success in DFS, and this is something you want to pursue as your, primary, maybe even your primary, but just something you want to come out of the season profiting, then you're going to want to hedge a little bit. I'm more of I like to go a little all or nothing when it comes to DFS, and I'm not advocating that. That's just simply my style. I'm much rather, let's say over the course of the season, my bankroll is $1,700. I'd much rather risk it all to win a lot than risk it to profit 300, So it's not really for me. I'm more likely to double down than I am to hedge.
Do we have the same issues in gambling and that we have in fantasy season long and DFS? Things like recency bias, and what do you do to avoid these things?
You absolutely do. So a lot of the lines really are set off of the last week, and you try not to get trapped in it. So to avoid it, I won't really chase a bet unless I like to look at, and again, this is something we provide on Football Diehards. I like to look at 3-week samples. So like if you go on our site, our scoring, our targets, snaps, everything, we have a lot of stuff in the context of 3-week samples. So I'm not liable to chase until I see a small amount of consistency, and the 3-week sample works pretty good for me. But I mean, if something feels good, you go for it. But it's interesting to see the book correct. 2 seasons ago, it's the best example I can give you. The book had that the Cardinals-Seahawks game would go to overtime, and you could also bet that it would end in a tie. That game went to overtime, ended in a tie that week, and of course the next week you couldn't bet any game to end in a tie because they got clobbered a little bit. So they're pretty good at correcting, their lines based off of what happened last week.
We do have a question, and I think this is worthwhile for the beginners. Can you give just a further explanation of chalk, good chalk, bad chalk, but just the basic premise of chalk?
Yeah, so chalk, in a nutshell, I think we can agree it's going to be the highest owned player. It's going to be the bet that everybody's going to make. It's going to be the quarterback everybody wants to pay up for. It's going to be the receiver everybody rosters, the running back, and then your overall chalk. It's just the highest owned player, and it's going to be the biggest bet. It's going to where all the public money is going. There's many resources out there where you can project ownership, and that's sort of how you can project chalk. And if you pay attention throughout the week to the noise on Twitter, this is something I wrote a little bit about in the magazines this summer. I'm always paying attention because once one of these pros or these really top guys, like a Jeff Mans, for example, who's coming up after me, Jeff mentioned somebody on Twitter on Tuesday that he likes. By Friday, everybody likes them, and everybody's going to be playing them. So these are the types of things that I look for, and it's almost like some of these really sharp guys can almost set the chalk. But cash games, you're gonna roster it. GPPs, you might fade it a little bit.
Right, and so I think this is let's take this a step further because we are playing. You and I will be playing, and we'll be covering it here tomorrow night. Best ball. It's you, me, Jeff Ratcliffe, Mike Dempsey, who's in how many? 150 already.
That's it.
Geared up at 3 today. Mike Beers, John Law, Bobby Gomez is going to play. Emo is going to play. Hussein the Brain is going to play. Brad Cruz, Gary Davenport, Casey Joyner. All of us, most of all of us who you saw throughout the week here are going to play in a little best ball. Are there any, gambling and DFS tactics that go into best ball or is it a totally different thing?
No, they're really, if you're still drafting now. So about 2 weeks ago, your player props season long player props came out, right? So you can I can pull it up and dig it up, but off the top of my head, I know Todd Gurley, for example, right? His line for touchdowns, total touchdowns, 16.5. That's a lot. That's, I'm probably taking the under on that, but I'm keeping that in mind when I'm evaluating players we want to draft. If Vegas likes him around 16 touchdowns, well, there's a reason he's going first overall. It's a tall order, but that's a lot of points. I'll take a look at quarterback yards. I'll see which quarterbacks are projected over 4,000 yards for the season, things like that. And of course, you're going to want to look at game totals. A team who's projected 4.5 wins, you might not in context, you're going to look at that a little further. Maybe you're going to fade some of those players. Maybe you're going to fade that running back, but maybe you're going to load up on, the Jets come to mind, your Robbie Andersons, your Quincy Enunwas, because there's going to be a lot of throwing and playing from behind in those games. So you can absolutely, for best ball purposes, take a look at season-long lines and just, again, another piece of that research that you can add to the puzzle.
So when we're drafting them, so I've drafted, I'm always rue when I find you in a draft room when I go into an MFL 10. Mike Beers, the same. Mike Dempsey, to a degree, because we're on the radio for an hour or so every day, and we like every player the same. So every player's ADP goes up. You take all this into account as you're drafting with a group like this.
Yeah, of course. I mean, so tomorrow night, for example, when we're drafting, ADP is going to be close to meaningless to me, and I think to most other people, because we saw it in the magazine drafts throughout the summer too. You want a player when you're playing with these type of people, you might need to jump a round or two to get them. Also, a guy like you, a guy like Mike, I've been in a couple drafts with you guys. I'm sort of learning your tendencies and your players a little bit. I've been in drafts with Mike Beers. I'm good friends with Mike Beers. I have an edge against you, Mike, because I know how you think. No, I'm just kidding. But it's like, enough people that you're in these expert drafts, you can kind of try to anticipate what they're doing. But for the most part, ADP is just going to be out the window. It's going to be a free for all with ADP, because we don't really care about it in these sorts of drafts.
And that is true. So when you're not drafting with us, when you're just out there doing an MFL 10 and you're in with a group of players, how close do you? How much more does ADP factor into those drafts? Are you a little more comfortable waiting on players towards the ADP? Or are you still being aggressive and going and getting your people?
To a degree. I mean, it truthfully, it really depends on the draft, but I touched on this a little bit and the other night when I was talking about best ball ADP. It's just a guide. It is not a constraint. Now, when you're in these leagues with names, that you completely don't recognize, sure, you can make an assumption that they're players that aren't in a ton of these MFL 10s. So you will see some players, particularly vets, start to tumble a bit. If I notice that happening, then yeah, I'm liable to wait a little bit and see how late I might be able to get a certain player. But it is the first thing I do. When I get the notification that my league is up and running, I get right in there. I immediately look at who else is in there and sort of give myself my own odds of my chances at winning this thing.
Okay, and if people missed it, they didn't see you the other night. Talk about some of your most owned players so far in best ball. Let's go by position. Start at quarterback. Who have you been investing heavily in?
Quarterback, loving Phillip Rivers. That guy is just he is consistently available way past any of his final finishes over the last 9 seasons, and it's just so great to be able to get him so cheap. Alex Smith too. A little surprised how much he's fallen outside of the top 12. I feel like he's kind of locked to finish inside. Running back, we talked about this. Full disclosure: an embarrassing amount of DeMarco Murray. It was early on.
Early.
Yeah. LeGarrette Blount, I have some exposure to. Theo Riddick. Receivers, and I actually forgot to mention this the other night, and I wanted to come back, jump in the chat and be like, Bob, I forgot to mention Cam Meredith. He's one of my highest owned receivers. Gotta love his projected role in New Orleans this year and in that offense. And he's a guy who I suspect might be pretty high owned week 1. And then for tight end, I have a ton of Cameron Brate. Too much Tyler Eifert now that he scared us a little bit with that beginning on Pup right there, and then that's it. That's where I stand at the moment.
And that's kind of encouraging that what Casey Joyner was saying about Alex Smith earlier. One of his QB2s that he thinks can put up QB1 numbers. Go check his article out at ESPN.com. That'd be very enjoyable. I have a last gambling question here for you. Yes. Where do you go to do your prop bets? What site?
My preferred site, and it's simply because of where I live. So in New Jersey, because we have casinos, we're not allowed to gamble on the Vegas books. So I've always just gambled on Five Dimes. But the nice thing about Five Dimes, if I could give them a totally unsolicited endorsement, their lines are loose. They always are. You always get a point and a half in your favor. They also have this fantastic tool called the Bet Builder. So let's say you like Nelson Aguilar for 4.5 points. You can keep going, and the odds get higher, longer shots, but a better payout. So maybe you want to bet him for 7 catches. you're going to have that option on the Bet Builder. It's a really cool tool. If anybody has trouble navigating it, just reach out to me. I absolutely love toying around in there.
And there we have it. We're going to wrap up with Jen here. I want to thank you again for all the segments you've done on this and for getting ready to come back tomorrow for the final segment. Remember, everybody, that'll be starting tomorrow night. We'll be cranking up a little later at 9 o'clock, and we'll run a full draft on MFL 10s to kind of run you through a draft, show you how it works. If you haven't seen it, we'll be analyzing picks. Jen, I, myself, Mike Dempsey, and it's a great crew that we have. Once again, it's myself, Jen Dempsey, Jeff Ratcliffe, Mike Beers, John Lobb, Bobby Gomez, Emo Cadlick, Hussein the Brain, Brad Cruz, Gary Davenport, and Casey Joyner. Should be a very good time. So, Jen, look forward to seeing you tomorrow night. And thank you again. Give that dog his toy back, please.
I am about to right now. He's being so good. He's sitting right next to me. Thank you, Bob. Can't wait for tomorrow.
All right. Looking forward to it again.